Hello again YouTube. A few years ago I owned a Suzuki V Strom, the old DL1000 variant. I put some videos up at the time, but they've long since gone. But now seemed like a good time to rehash those, as I've been yabbering on about my TDM 900, and the V Strom is a really good example of a machine which is, it's contemporary, it's something, an obvious machine to compare it to. So I've dredged up all the old footage that I did at the time, and I've cobbled it together into one long production. It commences with my thoughts on the purchase of it, and an attempt to do a bit of a road test, but on a day not dissimilar to today, where it was pouring with rain, it initially proved not that successful. But anyway, so here's the beginning bit. Sit tight, there's quite a lot to come. Hello again YouTube. As I'm sure you've realised by now, there is a new bike in the garage, a 2008 Suzuki DL1000 V Strom. My intention today had been to go out, take it for a ride around, do a bit of a review on it, which indeed I did. It has however been very wet out there this morning, which is probably what did for my microphone. So as a result, there's lots of riding around, not much review. Bit late in the day to go out and re-record it now, so I'll have to postpone that for another day. But in the meantime, I thought you might just like to enjoy some of the images that should have accompanied that review. Enjoy! So after a bit of a wet start and the resulting technology problems, I finally got round to riding it around and yabbering on and giving you my opinions and my initial impression of it. Here it is. So what you get is a 1000cc V-twin big trailer. Decent headlight, or headlights plural. Suzuki's fairly standard brake setup, which is pretty impressive. Certainly impressive enough for a bike of this style.
some reasonable suspension with decent access to some rudimentary adjustment. Preload at the front, preload adjustment at the rear, all easily got at. I particularly like this kind of setup because it requires no tools whatsoever. So if you're adding some luggage or pillion, you need to pick up your preload at the back. You don't need to break out any tools at all. You can just physically adjust it on this wheel. Nice big comfy saddle. And the ability to add lots of luggage so you can go toddling off into the wild blue yonder with all the crap you need to take with you. And what's it like to ride?
So climbing aboard the V Strom, it's immediately apparent just how tall it is. It's huge. I mean, it is of course one of the genre of big traily, dual sport, tall rounders, call them what you will. But it is very tall. My experience of this genre of bike is limited to this obviously and a Yamaha TDM, so I can't comment how it compares to, you know, other stuff like the Versys and BMWs and so on and so forth. But for me, who have a quite modest inside leg, it is very tall. It also feels quite heavy. Obviously once you get underway, the weight and the height doesn't seem to, you know, is unnoticeable because the bike is quite well balanced, it's quite well poised, you know, it goes where you point it, the handling is quite crisp, so that weight and that height become less relevant. But round town, car parks, junctions and so on and so forth, if like me you're of a modest inside leg, you need to be aware of it. That said, I mean, I've owned the bike a couple of weeks now and I've sort of don't notice it like I did. But of course, you know, obviously I'm now that bit more familiar with it, you know, I've put several hundred miles on it, and saying I'm a little more familiar. In terms of rider sort of, you know, the riding equipment and what have you, it's very basic. It's very typical of what Suzuki do very well, and that is they make a fundamentally good bike and they build it down to a budget. It doesn't feel cheap and cheerful, but it's not overflowing with gizmos and gadgets. Now, for what it's worth, that's not a criticism, because just how many gizmos and gadgets do you need? You know, when you're out riding a bike, do you want to ride it or do you want to be playing with all the modes and settings and stuff? Because the V Strom doesn't have any modes or settings or whatever. What you get is a nice clear dash, big analog clocks. I like big analog clocks, they're easy to read. You get 2 trip meters, which is great, one for your journey, one for your fuel if you're that way inclined. But it does have a fuel gauge, so you know, clocking the mileage of what you're doing per tank is sort of, you know, sometimes just for interest. And you get, you know, the usual raft of idiot lights, you know, the ones that you have to have by law, which is your turn signals and your high beam and then you get your neutral and your oil pressure. With the exception of a top gear indicator, that's pretty much it. Now, yeah, you just pull out in front, give them a wave, twat. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, the top gear indicator, I quite like that. Although, ironically, the bike that this is, or the engine that this is based on, the SV1000, of which I have one, could really use a top gear indicator. But this bike, because the gearing is as tall as it is, it's really obvious when you're in top. But it is nonetheless a great feature. I mean, it sounds very silly, I'm sure, but I quite like that, you know. There's only two places in the gearbox you need to, or would like to know you are, and that's neutral and top. Everybody has a neutral indicator light, but not everybody has a top gear indicator light. But right, then we have a screen. It's adjustable in 4 positions, I think, but again, in the way of Suzuki's budget take on stuff, in order to adjust it, you have to take the actual panel bit off. You have to move the mountings and then put the panel back on. But again, you know, is that really any big deal? Because, you know, you buy one of these, you ride it, you find where the screen height is best, and then once it's there, you leave it there, don't you? The only thing I have found is that when I first got this a couple of weeks ago, I was prattling about adjusting it, and it didn't seem to matter where I put it. There was an annoying sort of head turbulence, a little bit of head turbulence. Now, I couldn't seem to completely eliminate it. All I could do was change where in the speed range it occurred, which is why I bought this thing to pop on the top to sort of break up that airflow and see whether that makes a discernible difference. I'll let you know in a minute, because we're going to go for a quick black down the motorway, and I've only just fitted it. So apart from all that, what do you get? You know, you've got your fairly basic sort of cockpit, but you've got a comfortable riding position. You know, I mean, by virtue of the bike's tallness and, you know, the ergonomics of the thing, you sit very high, very, very, very high. So, which is great in traffic, because you have a commanding view over everything that's going on around you. You have a fairly big fuel tank, you know, in modern terms. It's about 20 litres, it's a fraction over. Which, given the bike's high gearing and therefore improved fuel consumption over the SV donor, it should give you reasonable mileage to a tank full. I mean, on paper, it should be good for 200 miles to a tank. In reality, I've found that around about the 160 mile mark, you're starting to look for garages. Well, I can confirm that the Puig, I think that's how you pronounce it, Puig, P-U-I-G, little bolt-on screen bit, that clips on the top of the standard screen, has eliminated the annoying head wobble at all speeds. So there you go. The engine on these is derived from the SV1000, Suzuki's SV1000, which in turn is a softened version of Suzuki's TL1000. So what you're getting is a softened version of a softened bike. So but it is still, obviously, it's 1000cc, it's a V-twin, so it delivers the torque in the manner that V-twins do. So you get quite a nice plush power delivery. It's not scary, it's quite usable, it's fairly linear, makes it quite pleasant to ride. The acceleration is plenty brisk enough, you know. You'd have a job to make 1000cc not brisk enough, wouldn't you, after all? And just everything about it is just very, very nice. In a budget sort of way, you know, it's clearly aimed at the BMW GS type market, the people that don't have BMW GS type money. Now, you don't get, obviously, shaft drive like the Beamers do, which is a huge advantage if you're actually doing big miles. But you do get everything else. You get the comfort. It feels like it's quite long-legged. You know, you can do big miles in a day on it without too much trouble. You're not constantly hunting for fuel. It's not inducing backache or arm ache. You know, maybe it's just my frame size, but the ergonomics just seem to work. And unlike BMW, you don't have quirky stuff like indicator buttons in strange places. And so all in all, for the budget tourer, it's probably quite a good buy. But for what it's worth, I have an opinion on the whole big tradie thing. Like most things I have an opinion on. Whilst I get the wanting the you know, the geometry, the long travel suspension, the softness, the comfort, I think a lot of the manufacturers, BMW included, Suzuki included, haven't quite got it right. Now, as I previously said, and if you've watched my channel before, you'll know, I used to own a TDM. And the TDM is broadly in that bracket. It takes trail bike geometry and sticks it in a big bike, which is not a trail bike. It's definitely a road bike. The TDM is a road bike. And the V Strom, although it sort of looks a bit trail bikey, in reality, 99% of people that ever buy one of these are going to do nothing more adventurous than bounce up a curb. So where the TDM wins over the V Strom is that, this bloody mirror's a bit loose, where the TDM wins over the V Strom is that although it has the steering geometry, you know, the long forks, blah blah blah, it actually has a much lower seat height. They managed to set it into the bike so that normal people, not just freaks of nature, can actually ride it. The wheels are a proper size, so you can put proper road bike tyres on it, and the exhaust is low slung. Now this last point I think is quite important, because there's a couple of things going on there. You're marketing this to people to go touring, or at least go to the shops. Now if your exhaust is high level, like it is on this, one of two things are going to happen. Either something like the Triumph example, where if you buy a Triumph with the high level exhaust, and like most modern bikes, the silencer is about the size of a 45-gallon oil drum, you've either got to scallop out one or both of the panniers, depending on, you know, whether it's a single or a twin silencer. Yeah, you've got to scallop them out such that they look like panniers from the outside, but when you open them, there's only actually about enough room to put a pair of Speedos in a toothbrush. Or, like on this example, you have normal width panniers, but the frame that carries them has got to be set out by the distance of the silencers, so they sit out a long way. And that means that, well, on this bike, if you fit the standard Suzuki panniers, they're wider than the handlebars. Now, you almost can't help it when you ride a bike. You're sitting here, looking at where your hands are, and they are the datum. They are what tells you how wide the bike is. You know, when you're filtering, the bars fit, everything else fits. Normally. So if you fitted a bike with panniers that are wider than the handlebars, and you treat these points as the widest point, go filtering, well, you can imagine what's going to follow. And then there's the other point with having high level silencers. The silencers on modern bikes, the standard silencers that is, are very, very, very heavy. Now when you design a bike and you look at where all the mass is, it should be around an imaginary line approximately between the steering head and the rear wheel spindle, or possibly where the rear wheel touches the ground, which is why panniers are so much better than top boxes, because the weight is lower at the back. And as you can obviously see with the silencers, you know, having a standard low-level silencer is much nearer that ideal mass, central mass line, whereas having them high is as bad as it can be. You know, you want the weight high at the front, low at the back. And high level silencers, particularly if you then couple it with a top box loaded up with God knows what, is the worst thing you can do for your mass centralisation. But hey ho, apart from that, I say I've had this a couple of weeks, done a few hundred miles on it now, and for what it is, it's actually quite a great bike, and it is as Suzuki intended. It's a budget way of doing what BMW GS's and Versys and TDM, which unfortunately is no longer made, which is a great shame. It does all those things at a budget. So I shall have no hesitation in later in the year toddling off to the south of France on it. Anyway, I've been me. This has been the Suzuki DL1000 V Strom. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.
Hello again, YouTube. We're another week into my ownership of the 2008 Suzuki DL1000 V Strom, and there's been a couple of mods this week in order to personalise it, make it more mine. One of which was the Puig screen that I mentioned in last week's video, and another is to accommodate, or help to accommodate, my modest inside leg. Hello again, YouTube. Last week I spoke briefly about this, the Puig aerofoil clip-on bit of visor, shield, fairing, call it what you will. And I commented that I felt it had improved the airflow across my crash helmet. I wasn't getting the head buffeting that I was getting before. Now it's all well and good me telling you that, but I was trying to find a way to see if I can demonstrate it. In the same way that sailors add bits of wool or something similar to the sides of their sails so they can physically see the airflow across them, I've temporarily taped a few bits of wool to the front of my lid and see if we can, in that same way, see if we can visualise the airflow across my crash helmet. Okay, so you could argue that that's not really conclusive proof, but I've tried to demonstrate what I've observed whilst riding the bike, and whatever the wool says, I've noticed a difference with the screen. The screen is simplicity itself to fit. It requires no drilling. It's simply a bolt on each one of these mounts which just pinches it against the existing screen. Job done. Next on my list of modifications is this, the seat, the saddle. Riding this bike, it is quite tall and it's pretty much at the limit of where I would want to be in terms of height. The place I bought it from quoted me about £100 to basically take some material out of here to lower it a little bit. But I managed to find one on eBay already done for about £30 less than they quoted me. As I was only looking to take about an inch out of the height, I like to do it here rather than in the suspension of the bike, because tweaking the suspension adjusts the geometry, which Mr. Suzuki spent a long time getting right. Given my inside leg is quite short, I can cope with the slightly reduced leg room between saddle and foot pegs. The benefit of the easier footing on the floor vastly outweighs that small loss. So there you have it, a couple of minor mods to the V Strom to make it a little bit more mine, a little bit more manageable for me personally. Hello again, YouTube. Anyone who knows me or who has followed my channel for any length of time will know that I used to own a Yamaha TDM850, which for my money is one of the most underrated bikes of all time. A fantastic design, years ahead of its time. Never really caught on in this country, although I think Europe quite likes them. But they took that whole sort of, well, they were pioneers in that sort of trail bike dimensions in a road bike setting. So, given the sort of the trail bike heritage of the thing, it's quite natural to draw sort of comparisons between that and things like the V Strom. And for me, where the TDM wins is the fact that they recognise that although it was a trail bike geometry, trail bike style type thing, it was very much a road bike. And one of my criticisms of things like the V Strom and Triumph's Tiger 800 and particularly the BMWs is, in reality, most people that buy one, they want that kind of adventure bike image, but actually they're not going to do anything much more adventurous than bounce up a curb. So these sort of pseudo knobblies that are fitted onto these bikes, the V Strom included, well, they're a bit pointless. They're a bit of a compromise. They're not a road tyre and they're not a knobbly tyre. They're just, they are the archetypal jack of all trades, master of none. The standard tyres on the V Strom are not too bad, but they are a pseudo knobbly, and I ride it on the road.
So a quick trip to my local tyre fitter has solved this particular problem. Those nice people at Michelin do proper road bike tyres in big traily rim sizes. The front of the V Strom runs a 110 by 80 R19, which is typically big and spindly, and the back is shod with a 150/70 17, which again is fairly typical for this style of bike. But Michelin's Pilot Road trail tyre provides a proper tread pattern.
I particularly like Michelin's Pilot Road series of tyres. When I bought the SV1000, it had a set of the Pilot Road 2 on them, and I have subsequently changed, to another set and to the 3s, and the V Strom is now running 4s. My TDM ran Michelin's. In fact, in recent years, with the exception of my Sachs Roadster 650, which I always used to run on Bridgestones, Michelin Pilot Road type tyres have been my tyre of choice. And thus far, the ones on the V Strom don't disappoint. I mean, admittedly, I've only done a few hundred miles on them, but that's been over a variety of very hot days and wet days and a few bits in between. And up to now, I have to say they live up to their reputation, and they are as good as the other ones I've experienced on other bikes. So there you have it. If you have a big trailie, or dual sport, or adventure bike, whatever you like to call it, but actually in reality you're going to ride it on the road and you're not going to take it across the Mojave Desert, you do have an option. There is road tyre available. I don't know what other manufacturers do for this type of tyre, and to be honest, I didn't bother looking, because as I say, these days Michelin Pilot Road for this, for road bikes is my tyre of choice. Anyway, I hope that's been of some vague, informative use to you, and thank you for watching as ever, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. So after about 6 months ownership, it was high time to jump on and head off and use it for the purpose for which it was bought. So after about 10 months of ownership, it was time to recap, to give a roundup or a summary of my ownership experience and my opinions of a 2008 Suzuki DL1000 V Strom. Here it is.
Well, hello again YouTube, and you find us on a particularly wet January morning. Parked cars near junctions, they want to shoot in, don't they? Yeah, a particularly wet January morning, and I thought it was about time I gave you a little bit of an update on the V Strom, because several people have asked, because I tend to do that, tend to do a bit on it and then something else comes along, you know, shiny, and then I lose focus on it. So I thought I'd give you a quick update on where we're at. Now, I've owned this now for about 10 months, and me and it travelled down through France, across the Pyrenees into northern Spain earlier in the year. It occasionally comes to work with me, not as often as it ought to, which tells me something about the bike actually, the fact that I don't naturally open the garage door and get on it, but it does do the commute from time to time, and whenever I go for sort of meet up with the lads, you know, if you're doing distance, particularly if the weather's not great like it isn't today, you know, it's a good choice for easy miles, which is sort of a good summary of it, actually. It is a very capable machine, very capable. Ooh, drain cover. A very capable machine. You know, it's with all the wind protection and the weather protection going on at the front, it's deceptively quick. Not in a knee down scratching exciting way, it's just fast. Its handling is perfectly capable, particularly now we've added some proper tyres. Although it could do with some knobblies with all this mud. The fuel consumption is okay, the riding position is comfortable, and it all adds up to a very capable package. But as I say, capable, it's I'm not sure that's a massive compliment. You know, it is damning with faint praise. Yes, it's brilliant. Well, no, sorry. Yes, it's capable and it does some stuff brilliantly. But the one thing it simply isn't is exciting. Neither in its the way it conducts itself on the road, nor the way in which it looks at you when you open the garage door. You know, I mean, I open the garage door like my SV and I go, oh yes. You know, it looks what it is. You know, it looks like a lot of fun. Whereas this looks capable, which is what it is. So probably, well not probably, definitely, in the next couple of weeks, it'll be getting a once over, an oil change, a fresh MOT, and then it'll be going on eBay while I look for the next something that does light a fire under my enthusiasm. You can normally tell, or I can normally tell, if a bike is, you know, the one for you if you name it. Although paradoxically this bike did get named. It's not, you know, it's not a name like, you know, some people call their bikes girls' names, don't they all? But this is known colloquially to myself and several of my friends as the Scania, because it's bloody huge, like a Scania. So, you know, if ever I say to anybody, you know, oh yeah, I'm taking the Scania, they know what I mean. It's funny actually, I used to go out with a girl who we used to call Scania. Yeah, tall, flat-fronted, lots of talk. I wonder whatever happened to her. But yes, it's going. It'll be going on eBay, and that's, you know, don't get me wrong, that's not because it's not a great bike. It is a great bike. It just doesn't fill me with excitement, and I like my bikes to fill me with excitement. And the task it was bought for, which it did very well, which was basically to go down through Europe last year, isn't it? It's 2018 now. I keep thinking we're in 2017. No, it was last year. The job it was bought for, it did admirably. But as I stated myself in a video I took, sat on the quayside, waiting for the ferry in Liverpool, you can tour on anything. People do tour on anything. You know, I myself have been to northern France many years ago on some wholly inappropriate machinery. And you know, you could argue, oh yeah, you know, going on something else, it's a compromise, you know, blah blah blah. But you know, are we not forgetting what the bike is for? It's not, you know. Oh, excuse me, bit of indigestion. Are we forgetting what the bikes are for? Again, as I've said in a video of mine previously, I don't justify my ownership of a bike. Yes, we can talk in terms of getting through traffic and decent fuel economy, you know, small footprint, helping congestion. Yes, it does all these things, but that's not what it's about. To me, bikes are about biking. And that is that whole... oh, flood. The whole kit and caboodle, you know. It's about the excitement of riding the bike. The fact that we do recognise there's an element of danger, because you can't have excitement without recognising there's an element of danger. The camaraderie, the social element, the brotherhood. It's not about good fuel consumption and wonderful touring capacity. So anyway, there you go, that's been me. A very quick update on the V Strom. Yes, it's great, but it's up for sale. So, thanks for watching, as ever. See you next time. Bye for now.
Suzuki's V Strom is a great bike in all its guises and all its variants. It's a wonderful machine and a capable machine. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. My ownership experience was a very positive one. However, it wasn't really the bike I wanted. The bike I should have bought, and indeed did go on to buy and currently own, is a Yamaha TDM 900. Wonderful thing.